Pharmacy. What was the first thing that popped into your head? Drugs? Pills? That white guy behind a counter that just had maybe a second cashier? The person you bring your goods to whenever you don't want to wait in line? No. Pharmacy is more than that. Pharmacy is about helping people. And this ties into my quote, which is, "Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile," by Albert Einstein. This is something that this is something I want to follow for the rest of my life. I want to be able to help others, to be able to go to work every day and know that I made an impact in somebody else's life. My name is Daniel Nguyen, and I will be studying pharmacy this year for ISEM. A little bit about me. I'm the oldest child in my family. I have a little sister, and she goes to middle school at Hunt. I am in the band here. I play the saxophone. I'm in the Varsity Wind Symphony, and I'm in the jazz band. My plans for college, I'm hoping to get into UT and complete their pre-pharmacy requisites and continue on into their pharmacy college. I've always had an affinity for science, and that's one of the reasons why I chose pharmacy. The first person I interviewed was Bob Blanford. He gave me the first look into pharmacy that I had, besides just walking into Walgreens and seeing what the people behind the counter did. He worked at hospital pharmacy, which was a lot different than retail pharmacy. One of the things that he was able to tell me was the differences between hospital and retail pharmacy and their benefits and disadvantages. He told me that one of the main reasons why people did retail pharmacy was for the money. People would come out of college, they would be in a ton of debt, and they would see, hey look, the salary in retail is really high, so I'm going to go into it. What they didn't realize is that the high salary came with a lot of consequences. They weren't able to spend their weekends with their families. They weren't able to hang out with their friends. They had to stay late and do closing shifts. And basically, he described it as hell. With hospital pharmacy, however, it was super flexible. He told me that he was able to spend a lot of time with his child, who was also an ISM. And he was able to go to his children's activities, go to their soccer practices, coach for them, and attend stuff like his daughter's ISM final presentation night. One of the downsides to hospital pharmacy, though, was that it was very mundane. He said every day was routine. He would have to go in, check his emails. He didn't have a lot of patient contact, which was something I was looking for. Most of his interactions were with nurses or doctors, telling them advice about drugs, and not necessarily consulting the patients. The second interview I went to was with Mr. Akinzai. He was the owner of a retail pharmacy, his own retail pharmacy. It was something that he had built up from scratch after coming over here from Nigeria. One of the major aspects that he told me about pharmacy was how much of a business it was. There was a lot of focus on the business aspect, and the majority of his work was actually business rather than filling pills like most of us think. He said that even though business was a large part of it, that was why he enjoyed it so much. He loved the feeling of being able to own something and watching it grow over time. The patient interaction in a retail pharmacy was also a lot different than in a hospital pharmacy. There was more patient interaction because he was able to talk to all of his customers and see them once a week. This led to him saying that it was a super rewarding job because he was able to see someone come in sick one week and then the next week be able to see them happy and not have to be on the drugs anymore. One of the main things he said that a retail pharmacist needs to have is passion. You have to have the passion to get out of bed every morning, come to work, deal with the customers that are fighting with you because their insurance won't pay for their drugs. And you have to have the passion to work hard in the beginning so that you can reap the profits later. He also told me that retail pharmacy was a very on-your-feet job, which was a stark contrast to the hospital pharmacy. Whereas in hospital pharmacy, you sat at a desk all day and typed stuff into a computer. Retail pharmacy, you filled prescriptions, you got up, talked to your customers, while also inputting stuff into a computer. The next interview I had was a very interesting one. I had originally scheduled an interview with a pharmacy manager named Justin Pond. And in the middle of the interview, the owner of the actual pharmacy came in, and I was able to get an impromptu interview with him. One of the cool things about compounding pharmacy is that it's personalized medication. So it's medicine that's specifically tailored to the customer. This means that they get what they want. They can choose what they want it to taste like. They can choose whether it comes in pill or capsule, or pill, capsule, liquid, or whatever they need, just in case they can't swallow pills or something. One of the things that Mr. Pond told me was that he had to learn how to balance multiple duties. Because it was such a small compounding pharmacy, he told me he had to wear multiple hats. So he had to handle business aspect of it. He had to work as a pharmacy technician sometimes while also managing the other technicians. He also told me that your license is basically your life. Once you get your license, you need to defend your license, the pharmacy license, as well as you can. You can't cut any corners, because once you lose your license, you're probably never going to be able to get it back, and you basically have to start from scratch over another career. Another thing that he taught me was diversity. So in investing, people want to diversify their portfolios. Well, with a career, you also want to diversify your options, because, or nowadays, the tenure of your work, like if you work in one place for too long, it doesn't matter as much as if you have a lot of experience in a lot of different places. He said that one of the reasons why he took this job was because it was different, and it diversified his resume just in case he needed to look for another job in the future. With compounding pharmacy, there's also a lot of problem solving, because every medication that you make is unique. That means you have to do a lot of equations and solving and using a lot of chemistry to see which chemicals will mix together the best to create the best medicine. Also with compounding pharmacy, there was a little bit of retail aspect to it. So you had to know how to deal with people in the best manner that you could. You had to make the customer feel like you were caring for them, even if their insurance company or something wasn't able to cover their medicine. The next interview I had was with Michelle Smoot. She is the Senior Director of Pharmacy Services at the U.S. Bioservices. Our interview was actually very interesting because she took me behind the scenes into the actual specialty of pharmacy, which was a lot different than what I had seen in the other pharmacies, such as a hospital pharmacy or retail pharmacy. Most of the stuff in that pharmacy was like an assembly line. They would start on one end, and they would package the medicine, make sure it was the right medicine, and then send it down to the other end, and they would send it off with FedEx. She told me that mistakes are very costly. With pharmacy, you cannot make a mistake. If you make a mistake, you might end up hurting one of the patients, which is not something that you want to do. That could cost a life and your license. She also told me that in specialty pharmacy, there is a lot of room to ascend. She started off in one of the lower level positions as a pharmacy technician, and over the years was able to grow into the grow up into the senior director of pharmacy services. From the same company I had, it was actually an interview on the same day, was with George Zula, who was the Vice President of Business Solutions. At first I was like, why do I want an interview with a guy who's doing business solutions? Because I'm researching pharmacy. Well, it turns out he had a lot of insight into pharmacy. Before this career, he had done a lot of retail pharmacy. He had even gone to hospital pharmacy. And he was able to compare all of them for me and tell me what he liked best. And like Mr. Blandford, he did not like retail pharmacy at all because of the high stress. In specialty pharmacy, basically deals with high-cost products. So it's stuff that you wouldn't normally find. It would never be over-the-counter stuff. It would never be stuff that they would sell in retail. These are things that cost in the thousands. Like their stock, I think, was an average of $10,000. That was the average medication price. He said that this career was super rewarding because he was able to help people who couldn't afford these expensive drugs by working through their insurance companies or finding ways to raise money to help those people. One of the difficult parts about specialty pharmacy is the regulations, because these drugs could be potentially harmful if they're mixed with other things, the FDA has put a ton of regulations on them, and they have to comply with them in order to keep selling their products. Communication is also very important. As the Vice President of Business Solutions, he had to work with an entire group of leaders in the company in order to figure out what was best for their company. And he said that also carried over from pharmacy before then, because in a normal retail pharmacy, he would have to work with pharmacy technicians and pharmacists from other shifts. One of the main things that he wanted me to pull away from it, though, was pharmacy. With pharmacy, there's so many different paths you can take. You could be a radioactive pharmacist, you could be a nuclear pharmacist, you could be a retail pharmacist, hospital pharmacist, specialty pharmacist. So he said that if I want to do something in the healthcare profession, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, to go into pharmacy, because there's so many different options, and I'm bound to find something that I would like. Through George Zula, I was able to obtain an interview with Thomas Matthews, the specialty pharmacy manager at Walgreens. The first thing I saw when I walked into the pharmacy was a lot of cubicles. You may be like, why are cubicles important? Well, one of the main things I was looking for pharmacy was hands-on work. I did not want to do a desk job. That was one of the main things I was trying to avoid. And when I walked in and I saw a bunch of desks, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. Well, it turns out it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Even though they were stuck inside the cubicles all day, they had a lot of patient contact through phone calls. Because this was a specialty pharmacy, most of the patients wanted to talk to the pharmacist. A lot of them had chronic problems and they were confined to their home, and they wanted somebody to talk to, somebody to talk things through with, and they could do that through the pharmacist at the specialty pharmacy. One of the things that he taught me was to choose a career that's best for my lifestyle. The reason why he chose specialty pharmacy was because he knew he wanted to be able to go home at night and spend time with his family and spend time on the weekends with his family, and through other types of pharmacies like retail pharmacy or even hospital pharmacy, he couldn't really do that. He told me to, before going into a career blindly, to research the career and figure out if that was a career I wanted. Because once you start, you kind of progress through the company and you can grow higher and higher, but if you switch jobs in the middle, you basically have to start from scratch. Through Tom Matthews, I was able to get an interview with Bobby Dobbins. Mr. Dobbins was one of my favorite people to interview because I felt like he was the only one with a personality. Most of the other ones were very professional, and because they had to deal with doctors or they had to deal with customers. But with Mr. Dobbins, his specialty pharmacy had almost no patient contact. Most of his drugs were sent to a mother company in another state, and so he didn't really have to deal with the customers. Because of this, he was able to have a lot of fun through his job. During my interview, he actually took me into the break room and showed me pictures of their potluck in the past week, where one guy was dressed up in like a pilgrim costume and another guy was dressed up as a turkey. I was like, this is a place I want to work in, somewhere I can have fun and still have a stable career. One of the downsides I saw to it was a lot of computer work. He said that out of the 8 hours of the day he worked, he spent 7 checking emails. Like, how do you even do that? But some of the things that he taught me was that you have to be positive. If you're not positive, then your workplace isn't going to be positive and nobody is going to be productive. You also need to be very organized. As I said, as I learned in one of the previous interviews with Mr. Smoot, any mistake can be super costly to the patient. So you have to be perfect. He said that even though, I asked him how difficult the career was, and he said it was very easy, but you have to be perfect. And I was like, how? What? How? But he's like, well, if you get into a routine and you do everything in a routine way, there's a lot less chance that you're going to mess up. Through my research assessments, I learned about a couple of things. The first research assessment I did was on the characteristics that I need to be a pharmacist. The first one was you have to be outspoken, you can't be shy, especially in a retail setting. Whenever you're up in front of a customer, the customer needs to know that they can trust you. They need to know that you're choosing, or you're filling the medication that's right, and you're giving them the right advice to take the medicine. You also have to be very detail orientated. That ties back into the perfection. If you're not detail orientated, how are you supposed to be perfect? You also have to be willing to help. A lot of the job duties of a retail pharmacist is that you have to be able to talk to a customer. You have to understand them. You have to try to get the best price for them out of the insurance company. You're also required by law to consult them, and if you consult them poorly, there's really no point to consulting them. There's also the aspect of teamwork. With retail pharmacy, you have a team of pharmacy technicians underneath the pharmacist. You have to know how to influence your team into doing the correct things and how to get them to get stuff done. You also have to be very business-minded. Pharmacy is basically like opening up a store. You're selling a commodity, and that commodity is medicine. So you have to be able to know how to stock inventory correctly and know how to get the most out of insurance companies so that you don't go bankrupt. The next research I did was on technology that is going into pharmacy. One of the things I was afraid of was the job outlook of pharmacy, because people were always saying that our pharmacists are going to be replaced by robots. There are already pill counters out there. You can type stuff into the mystical internet and figure out stuff. But through this article, I found out that wasn't true. What patients want is human contact, and if they have to get most of their information through a computer system or from a machine, they're not going to trust them as much as they would trust a human. This also gives pharmacists more time for their patients with the consulting, and or technology gives more time for the patients. With pill counters, the pharmacists don't have to spend time that they could be spending time consulting patients, just filling prescriptions. They can actually use that time and be useful and help give good advice to the patients. One of the last research assessment I did was in specialty pharmacy. This was after I had visited the U.S. Bioservices. I was very confused about what a specialty pharmacy was. This is how I figured out that specialty pharmacy was sort of a central hub for all the patient's needs. Basically, it tied together the doctor, the pharmacist, the pharmacies, and the insurance companies all in the one to make it easier for a person with a chronic disease to get their medication at an okay price. Specialty pharmacy also calls for patient bonds, because patients are normally having to come in once a month, and just like visiting a doctor, they would visit their pharmacist, get advice, and they would get a sort of a checkup. The growth of specialty pharmacy is also very high. It's the fastest growing portion of pharmacy today. And I think this would make a good career for me in the future. Pharmacy and me. I see pharmacy as a very viable career for me with my love for science and my love for chemistry and biology. It's also a very stable career. The growth is about average right now, and it's supposed to continue to grow into the future. It also pays very well, which would allow me to spend less time working and more time with my family, and I would also be able to support my family. I would also be able to help others, which is something that I look for a lot in a career. I'm looking for a lot in a career. And there's also very many different paths. So if I ever get tired of one portion of it, or I find out that I don't like one portion of it, I can always switch to another path. And that's why I sit.